Welcome, everybody. Today, we are having a fantastic session that I'm particularly looking forward to with Mike Willsmore, Physio here. And he's talking through sort of the common kind of injury avoidance and causes of injury that us endurance runners tend to experience from time to time. So I'm sure it's going to be a very fascinating section.
First of all, thanks for joining me this morning. Hopefully you've all got a coffee or a notepad. And there's quite a lot I want to go through today, so don't feel like I'm going to give you a specific diagnosis or treatment plan for any particular injury. What I want to get across here really is the different things that can cause injuries, different things that I see within my clinic that can sort of be related to that as well. So hopefully give you lots of thinking points, lots of things you can go away as coaches and athletes and try and modify what you're doing slightly. And especially if you're having repeated injuries, this is something that I think will be really useful for you and to sort of pass on to your peers and friends as well. This is what we're going to look at today. So just a brief content slide there. So what is an injury? A few common injuries based on overuse injuries. And then we'll go into how you can avoid it or reduce your chance of an injury, followed by warning signs. How long does soft tissue take to adapt? So I'm talking your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles here. And then we'll look into some considerations. So basically a summary on what we've talked through. And then hopefully, as long as I haven't jabbered on too long, we should have time for some questions at the end. Okay, so a little bit about me. So my background, I started running when I was 14, and that was after winning a fun run down in Plymouth. And then I got sort of guided into the running sort of fraternity from there. However, at 17, I joined the Royal Marines, and my running was a little bit more of a backseat there. And it wasn't until 25 that I actually started training with any structure. And from there, at the ripe age of 35 now, I've sort of managed to progress down to running 340 and 1451 5K. So Graham's done a pretty good job with me, I'd say. And I've learned a lot over that time. I left the Marines in 2010 and retrained as a physio. And since that time, I now work part-time for back with the MOD as a civil servant, and then run my own private clinic as well with a mix of virtual physio, which seems to be the way things are going at the moment, and obviously face-to-face clinics as well, but both very successful in terms of getting people better, which is the main thing really. So that's enough about me, and we'll move on to the next slide. So what is an injury? So there's two different types really. Okay, so the first type being a repetitive or an overuse injury, and this is something that generally comes down from repetitive motions and is where you damage the muscle, the ligaments, tendons, bones, or the joints themselves. So it takes a fair bit to do that latter one. This is what the main thing that physio or having a good plan within your schedule is going to change. If we look at other types of injury, which are your traumas, there's not a lot you can do about these. If these happen, then you've got to deal with them as appropriate. So if you've broken something or you've torn a muscle, that there's less you can do to control those elements really. But hopefully with a good structure and a good plan and some strength and conditioning amongst all your work, you can look to reduce your chances of causing injury, because we can never completely eliminate it. You could be the most seasoned athlete out there and you will still be at risk of an injury at some point. So it all becomes a bit of a balancing act. These injuries tend to come from sort of three main things really. So whether it is a movement issue, a strength issue, or a training load issue. So they're the three things that will lead on to an injury. So it's important to be able to step back sometimes and try and identify that, or get other people involved. Sometimes it's hard to see the wood through the trees when you're trying to do it all yourself. So having a coach on board or do it, or chatting things through with friends is quite a good way to do it. So some of the different types of injuries that I'd class as overload or overuse injuries are listed here, so I won't go through them, just again thinking of time that we're on, and I don't want to sort of waste it going through something that I'm not going to go too much in depth to today. So as you can see there, I'm sure some of those injuries you've come across in your time. Some of you may have been fortunate to have a few of them, and some of you may have had the same injury more than one time as well, which begs the question, what do you need to do differently to make that not happen? So again, that's hopefully something by the end of this you'll have an answer to. Okay, so how can we avoid an injury or reduce the chances of an injury occurring? Okay, avoid injury had a bit of a catchier title, so that's why I put that in there. So these are the areas that I'm going to cover today. So footwear, we're going to briefly touch on that before going through warm-up, cool-downs, running surfaces, a little bit about mobility, and then adhering to training loads, and we'll look at things like circuits and strength training and benefits to them as well. So first of all, okay, straight into the deep end here really. Footwear is always a contentious subject, especially with the super shoes, as people seem to be calling them now. But the thing that I want to talk about is the correct use of footwear. Okay, I've had a few people that come to me in clinics, and when you delve into the depths of what they're doing, a lot of time they might have really like running in their racing flats or their lightweight trainers, and this isn't always a good thing. And it doesn't matter what your weight is; it's about the load and the impact that's going through your body when you're doing it. So a more cushioned pair of trainers, something that's got a bit more give in it, so a little bit more support, is going to be better. So if you're doing your long runs in your racing flats, you're probably at some point going to risk injuring yourself, or put yourself at more risk anyway, whether that's a stress fracture or plantar fasciitis or a tendinopathy, something like that. So really think about what you're using. Also consider the surface that you're using as well. So if you're off-road, okay, a more of an off-road appropriate trainer would be better. And there's lots of good ones on the market. I'm not going to delve into what you should and shouldn't be using, but just think about what the purpose of that trainer is and what you want to do with it. It's unlikely that your trainer is going to cause the injury unless, like I say, you're using a lightweight trainer for your longer runs, unless it's specific for that. Then you need to be sort of thinking or looking at the rest of your running really. So have you increased your load, like as in your training plan, too much? Are you neglecting your strength and conditioning? And try to get a good understanding of what might be causing that, because say trainers, you stick them on the end of your feet and you go for a run. So there isn't a lot of evidence to support one trainer is better than another, though there is some evidence that say the zero drop trainer is likely to cause a little bit of increased loading through your body in some place. Again, that will be individual to you depending on your running style and form. Pronation trainers, again, a little bit of mixed evidence out there. Some say that they help reduce injury, but the evidence out there is actually quite poor. So a lot of the articles that come out now say use a trainer that you feel is beneficial and comfortable for you. And what I mean by that is, does it make your pain less? So if you're in a trainer and you feel that that's the issue, compare it to another trainer. So use your normal trainer with a pronated trainer or pronation control trainer, and see whether that actually makes a change, because it might actually not do anything for you, and you're being bought into this sort of historical background of, oh, you must have a pronation trainer to reduce your injury, and that may not necessarily be the case. But use a professional to help you with this. It's all well and good doing it online, and obviously it's very hard at the moment with not being able to get to see a professional, but it might be something that's happened within your movement pattern, within your running, that is causing the injury as opposed to the trainer itself. So a few things to think about there. Also, one a bit about sort of using your treadmill, not using your treadmill. So when you go and have a gait analysis at a running shop, so there's lots of evidence that you need to be running at least 7 minutes before your body is warmed up and supple enough to be running into a normal running style. So if you hop into your local running shop or your Sports Direct or wherever and jump on a treadmill for 2 minutes in your jeans, it's very unlikely you're going to come away with the right trainer. So it's always worth thinking about other factors around it before you jump into that. But again, that's a subject on its own. I won't delve into that one anymore. Okay, so warm up and cool down. Okay, regardless of whether you're an elite athlete or you're a club runner, this is an important factor to me. Okay, it allows your body to get ready for what you're going to ask it to do. If you got out of bed and sprinted straight out the door, okay, the chances are you're not going to perform as well as if you'd spent time to get your body ready. Okay, so a warm up warms your muscles up, makes things more supple, increases your metabolic efficiency as well. So there's lots of good evidence evidence to support the important use of a warm-up within your schedule. And the most important part for me is mental preparation. If you're about to do a really hard session and push yourself within what the targets of your training are, okay, you need to be ready for it. And there's the mental aspect, and I'm sure Mark will agree with me here, is that you need to, like, the mental side of your training is quite important, and it will allow you to get more out of yourself. So having a warm up where you can sort of really think about what you're doing and getting yourself in the zone, using your drills, using your basic warm up techniques, you're going to get more out of yourself when you get to that. When we move to a cool down, however, there's mixed evidence. So your body will shift the excess lactic acid you've produced within an hour, and so doing your warm down is not actually shifting that lactic. It's not necessarily what it's doing, and there's no evidence to say it reduces your muscle soreness either. However, it reduces your blood pressure, reduces your body temperature, and allows you to process what you've just done. Okay, so from my point of view, as important as the warm-up, because it allows you to put everything into context about what you've done, okay, and just clear things through a little bit, get rid of that baggy head after a hard session. And also, it's a good point to just be able to then put that session to bed. Okay, if it's been good, great. Okay, it's just good springing forward. If it's not gone as well as you'd like it to, you can't change it. So use that cool down as your time to analyze that. Okay, put it to bed. Okay, and then move on with your next step of your training. There's no point in being annoyed with something if you can't change it. And I think that's very much the case with training sessions as well. If you can learn from it, then it's beneficial. Okay, so running surfaces. Okay, so some people are lucky and they'll have a good variety of different surfaces that they can run on, often these people will have less injuries because there's a lot of variation within their training. If you're always running on a road, there's obviously increased impact, and that's where the importance of the trainers come in to make sure you're well cushioned and well supported with this. What I want you to think about though is, if you've got an injury or a niggle, you need to consider that surface that you're running on, because actually it might be making it worse. So if you've got a bit of an Achilles tendinopathy, for example, and you go and do your sessions on the mud or the grass and the beaches, okay, then you're actually probably going to aggravate that injury a lot easier and have less capacity to run than you are if you do it on a more rebounding surface like the road or a trail. So think about what you're doing, make sure you've got the correct footwear for that, and that should help you to move forward a little bit with that one. Okay, mobility. So again, this area can be quite contentious. Some people will go, I never stretched in my life. Other people will go, I can't go out of the house, or I can't do my run without doing stretching. So what I want to do here is try and give you a little bit of reasoning behind different approaches, and hopefully that will help build up your mobility plan around what you're doing as well. Because remember, everyone's different. So what works for you will not necessarily work for your friend. And that goes the same with footwear as well. So I didn't mention that just because your mate runs in the new Pegasus, other trainers are available, then it doesn't mean that they're the right trainer for you. So everything needs to be taken into context and considered with you as an individual. So first of all, you need to consider, are you flexible enough for the task you're trying to do? So a steeplechaser will be very different to a marathon runner. Okay, you've got different goals, you've got different objectives. Hopefully in a marathon, you're not trying to jump over anything. So again, always a good thing to consider. And then we've got to look at balance. Okay, so if you can't stand on one leg and control it, okay, how can you expect to control that movement and will not waste energy when you start to add momentum into it? Obviously, the mechanics change a little bit when you do that, but you can't expect to be as efficient as you want to be and run as quick as you possibly can if you're not able to control simple movements like walking on your tiptoes or standing on one leg. So that's definitely something that should be a big part of everyone's rehab, and just shoehorn it into your training, so or into your daily life. So when you're brushing your teeth, stand on one leg while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. These are all simple ways that you don't then have to go, right, okay, I'm going to set this time aside, because life very much gets in the way. And if you do that, you're probably not going to maintain it for a long period of time. if you speak to anyone that's sort of come to me for treatment, that's very much how I put my rehab across as well. It's fit it into your life, and not your life around your rehab. Okay, because otherwise it will fall flat pretty quickly. And then we look at symmetry. Okay, it's a bit of an interesting one. Okay, we kind of think, or we used to think that you had to be symmetrical. So left had to equal right, front equals to back in terms of your strength and distribution. This isn't necessarily true. And again, it's dependent on the sport or the distance you do. For example, a 400-meter sprinter will generally have a stronger right hamstring, eccentrically, than they will on their left leg. And that's because it's the outside leg. So it works differently mechanically than the inside leg does. And then, where did I put it? There's a difference in terms of the symmetry compared to a sub-elite athlete to an elite athlete as well. So most elite athletes are seen to have a bigger glute max compared to the sub-elite athletes. And that was the biggest difference seen from one side to the other. So symmetry, although you want to be fairly similar, okay, an imbalance is not always a bad thing. So it's taken into context. Okay, and then we've got stretching. Okay, so lots of evidence around stretching, some good, some bad, some poor, quality-based stuff. So again, it's what I'd say with stretching is if you like stretching, stretch. If you don't like stretching, then it's not essential. Okay, it depends on you as an individual. If you're a hypermobile person, so nice and bendy, then I wouldn't be stretching. I'd be looking at more strength work with you because you need to be able to control those movements. And that sort of brings me, so I've got a stiffness scale written down there. So this is nice and flexible, not very flexible. Okay, if you're down that flexible end, okay, and you're not strong enough through the range, then you're going to be creating more load and strain through your knees, through your hips, through your ankles, okay, and therefore stretching is not going to be a beneficial element for you. Whereas if you're stiff, you're not getting good hip extension, you're going to be loading the joints a lot more, and therefore something like stretching would be useful. And then we think about when do we want to be stretching? Okay, before a session, want to be looking at dynamic mobility, really. We don't want to be holding prolonged stretches because what it does, it reduces the elasticity within the muscles, okay, and that is going to reduce your economy and reduce your performance effectively. And whether that's in a race or training, okay, you're obviously wanting to push yourself as hard as you can or within the context of that session. So consider when you stretch, I wouldn't be doing anything hard pre-session, but if I did, so say I wanted to stretch my calves because they always feel a little bit tight, then I'd probably be adding some ballistic movements, so some hopping, skipping, jumping along with that, just to try and counteract some of those detrimental effects of prolonged stretching. If we want to improve the length of something, okay, we don't just stretch it because that will only give us a short-term benefit of effects. Okay, so what we need to do is load it at length. So what I mean by that is take it to that point where it feels tight, okay, and then do the movement or the load and exercise within that area. So that could be something like a straight leg deadlift if we're looking at hamstrings, or a calf raise on a step. So then we're dropping down past the step, okay, and then that will give us a lot more benefit because we're lengthening the muscle eccentrically into the end of its range, and we're likely to get a lot more carryover by that as opposed to just stretching. Okay, so again, what I'm trying to advise here is think about what you're doing. Okay, if you're not sure, ask someone for advice, and a lot of time you don't need a lot of advice to be able to make the positive changes that you need to.